There is a grace within a woman that does not beg to be seen. It is the quiet thunder of dignity, the sweet honey of self-respect. And yet, in the hunger to be loved, many a sister has traded her crown for crumbs. I say this not in judgment, but in remembrance of the many who forgot that they were already whole. When a woman forgets her value, she becomes a whisper in a world where she was meant to roar. Today, we walk together through the quiet thieves of worth, the habits, the heartaches, the hesitations that chip away at the divine value you carry. Let us speak truth and rise. There is something deeply corrosive about the quiet tolerance of disrespect. It does not break you in a single moment. No, it chips at your dignity slowly, subtly, like waves against a cliff, wearing away the strong edges of your self-respect until you begin to doubt they were ever there. It starts in small, almost forgettable ways. A harsh tone in public, a joke at your expense, a delayed reply that stretches into disregard. And though your spirit flinches, you say nothing. You explain it away. You call it stress, a bad day, his past, your patience. But the body keeps score, and the soul always remembers. Every time you ignore that sting in your chest, every time you swallow a hurt word and dress it as understanding, you make a quiet agreement with the very pain that came to test you. A woman who tolerates disrespect teaches others how to treat her, not because she is weak, but because somewhere in her journey she was told that love requires endurance, and that to be good, to be loyal, to be woman enough, she must bear what burns. And so she becomes fluent in forgiveness before she ever learns the language of self-protection. She smiles through slights. She walks back into rooms where her presence is only half welcome. She bends and breaks and calls it being flexible. But respect is not a privilege you earn by shrinking. It is the most basic expression of human love, and without it, all affection turns poisonous. You begin to internalize the behavior, believing perhaps you deserve it. Maybe you were too emotional, too sensitive, too needy. Maybe if you were quieter, calmer, less complicated, he wouldn't raise his voice. You begin editing yourself, censoring your brilliance, sacrificing your boundaries in the name of harmony. You laugh when you are insulted. You kiss when you want to cry. You stay even when your heart has long packed its bags. Because the idea of confrontation has been made to feel more frightening than the constant erosion of your peace. And yet, there is nothing more tragic than a woman who has taught herself to be comfortable with crumbs. She pretends to be full while starving for kindness. She covers the bruises on her spirit with makeup and soft words. She turns her pain into poetry that no one hears but her. Every act of disrespect that goes unchecked becomes a seed planted in the garden of her worth. And soon, weeds of confusion and self-doubt grow tall, casting shadows over her once bright soul. She forgets the sound of reverence, the feeling of being honored, the warmth of being spoken to with tenderness. She begins to think this is the best she can get, the highest form of love she is worthy of receiving. There is a silent betrayal that happens when a woman begins to fold herself down, not because the world asked her to, but because she believes love demands it. She begins to soften her power until it's barely a whisper. She hides her opinions behind agreeable nods. She hesitates before she speaks, weighing each word like it's a risk to be too much. She lowers her voice so she won't be called loud, curbs her ambition so she won't seem threatening, puts her dreams on a dusty shelf so they don't outgrow the man standing beside her. And in the quiet of her own mind, she starts telling herself that small is safe, that less is lovable, that the only way to be held is to be manageable, to be malleable, to be meek. And oh, how dangerous it is to believe that shrinking yourself will make someone stay. Because when you dim your light to protect his ego, you don't just lose your radiance, you lose the very essence that made you extraordinary. You begin to walk carefully, like you're always on someone else's stage, performing what you think will be pleasing, palatable, acceptable. You laugh quieter, you dress simpler, you celebrate your wins in silence. You begin to apologize for your shine, even as your soul aches to be seen. And while he may stay, what he stays with is not the fullness of your being, but the edited version. The watered-down woman who believed love could only find her if she came in a smaller size. This performance becomes exhausting, and yet you continue it because you've been conditioned to believe that being powerful is punishment, that a woman who knows who she is will scare a good man away. But no man who is worthy will ever ask you to cut yourself down to fit inside his comfort. Still, the fear lingers. So you stay quiet when you have something to say. You bow your head when you should be lifting your chin. You stay behind when you should be soaring. And somewhere deep inside, a fire grows, not a fire of passion, but of mourning. Mourning the parts of yourself you abandoned for the illusion of belonging. And the world may call you loyal, may praise your gentleness, may admire your patience, but they do not know the cost. They do not hear the silent screams of the woman who once roared. You were never meant to be ornamental. You were never meant to decorate someone else's life while leaving your own untouched. Your power, your brilliance, your divine voice, they were meant to take up space, to shake rooms, to shift hearts. But when you play small, you live as a guest in your own life. You become fluent in pleasing others, but forget the sound of your own joy. You give away pieces of yourself, believing that being less will finally be enough for someone to stay. There is a heaviness that walks beside a woman when jealousy becomes her shadow and insecurity curls itself around her heart like smoke. She does not enter love with suspicion. No, she brings a tender heart, one that only wants to feel safe. But over time, the fears begin to whisper louder than reason. She begins to scan his silence for signs of betrayal, searches his eyes for validation, checks his phone not for truth, but to calm the thunder in her chest. And even if he's done nothing wrong, the battle isn't between them, it's within her. Because when you do not believe you are enough, every glance he gives to someone else feels like a threat. Every pause in affection feels like rejection. Every moment he is not looking at you feels like he's forgotten what you are worth. Insecurity does not come from the absence of love. It comes from the absence of trust in oneself. When a woman has not made peace with her own reflection, she begins to look outside of herself for a mirror. And those mirrors, they distort. They show her ghosts where there are none. They turn kindness into suspicion, silence into abandonment, and presence into a performance she must constantly audition for. And so she begins to compare her beauty, her body, her worth, stacked up against strangers who do not know her story. Her joy becomes conditional on his constant reassurance. But even when he gives it, it's never enough, because she's pouring it into a cup with a hole at the bottom. She begins to question his every move, not because he is untrustworthy, but because she does not trust the soil she's planted her heart in. She becomes guarded, watchful, always preparing for the hurt she believes is inevitable. And in doing so, she builds walls between them, walls meant to protect, but that only isolate. Her heart longs for closeness, but fear tells her to brace herself. And in that bracing, she cannot receive the very love she yearns for. She starts to test him, not because she wants to hurt him, but because she needs proof that he won't leave, proof that she is still seen, still wanted, still chosen. But love that is always under interrogation forgets how to breathe. Jealousy does not only hurt the one it targets, it wounds the woman who holds it. It drains her light, clouds her mind, robs her laughter. She begins to walk through life checking her reflection in other women's eyes, wondering if she measures up, if she can be enough to stop him from wandering, not realizing that love cannot be tethered by control and true worth cannot be proven by possession. Insecurity tells her she must compete, must cling, must correct herself to keep him. It turns softness into fear, connection into obsession, and before long the relationship becomes less about love and more about survival, about fighting invisible battles in the hope that winning them will make her feel whole again. There is a quiet sorrow that unfolds when a woman forgets to care for herself in the name of love. At first it seems noble. She gives and gives until her giving becomes her identity. She rises before she is ready. She stays up late tending to his needs, his moods, his dreams, while her own go untouched, collecting dust on a forgotten shelf inside her. She shows up for him in ways she no longer shows up for herself. The woman who once ran warm baths, journaled her dreams, danced in the kitchen just because now rushes through her mornings, skips meals, swallows stress, and calls it strength. She no longer tends to her temple, her body, her spirit, her mind, and wonders why she feels depleted, why her laughter no longer comes from the belly, why her joy feels like a distant friend. She mistakes exhaustion for effort, thinking that if she just loves him harder, if she just sacrifices more, he'll see her, choose her, cherish her in the way she's forgotten to cherish herself. But there is no glory in self-abandonment. There is no intimacy in neglect. When a woman stops caring for herself, she doesn't just dim her light. She begins to disappear in plain sight. Her skin grows dull. Her eyes lose that spark. Her movements become mechanical. She begins to feel like a stranger in her own body, disconnected from the very vessel that carries her soul. And still she pushes forward, tending to others, hoping someone will notice her unraveling and offer her the tenderness she no longer offers herself. Self-care is not luxury. It is language. It is the way you tell the world, I matter. And when you stop speaking that language, people will begin to believe your silence. They'll take more than you can give, not always out of malice, but because you've taught them, you'll endure. But a woman who doesn't water her own garden cannot blossom, no matter how deeply she loves another. When you neglect yourself, you teach your partner, and more dangerously, your own soul, that you are not worth the time, the pause, the breath, the sacred ritual of restoration. And slowly, the neglect becomes normalized. You begin to pride yourself on endurance, not peace, on surviving, not thriving. You wear tiredness like a badge. You brag about how much you handle, how little you need, how well you manage it all, even as your body whispers for rest, even as your spirit begs to be seen by you again. But a woman who does not nourish herself becomes hollow in ways no man can fill. She starts seeking love to repair what only solitude and softness can heal. She asks for reassurance, not because she doesn't trust him, but because she no longer recognizes her own reflection. She begins to resent the very relationship she once poured into, because her needs, left unmet, have turned to quiet resentment. Not because he ignored them, but because she never voiced them, never honored them, never slowed down long enough to hear her own soul speak. There is a quiet ache that lives in the heart of a woman who gives too much. She gives not because she is weak, but because her love is vast. She gives her time, her attention, her softness, her strength. She gives in silence behind smiles, through tired hands and weary eyes. She gives without asking, without counting, without demanding anything in return. Not out loud, at least. She convinces herself that love is found in the offering, in the way she anticipates his needs before he even names them, in the meals she cooks, the burdens she carries, the parts of herself she tucks away to make room for him to expand. She gives because she believes that is what a good woman does. She pours and pours and pours until the cup is empty and the table still asks for more. And yet beneath that giving is a quiet longing, a longing to be seen, not for what she can do, but for who she is. A longing to be met with the same open palms she extends, to be held the way she holds others, to be poured into without having to first be empty. But she doesn't ask, she doesn't demand. She fears it will make her seem needy, ungrateful, too much. So she gives again and again, hoping that if she just loves hard enough, proves her loyalty deep enough, stays soft long enough, he will eventually match her. But love given without balance becomes a burden, not a blessing. It turns a woman into a well that never runs dry on the outside, but on the inside, the stone bottom has long been exposed. She begins to feel unappreciated, invisible even. Her efforts no longer bring her joy because they've turned into expectations, not from him, but from the silence. And when that silence grows, when he takes without thought, receives without gratitude, assumes without offering, she tells herself, this is just the way love works. But deep down, her soul knows better. Her soul knows that real love is reciprocal, not a transaction, but a sacred exchange. And when that exchange stops, resentment begins to grow like vines around her heart, tightening each time she shows up and is not met. Not because she needs grand gestures, but because even the strongest woman needs to feel chosen, cherished, filled. She begins to question her worth, not because it has lessened, but because no one is reflecting it back to her. Her kindness begins to feel like a wound. Her giving starts to feel like sacrifice. And slowly, her light begins to dim, not all at once, just a little at a time. She laughs less, dreams less, loves herself less. And still she gives because she doesn't know who she is without the giving. She has built her identity around service, forgetting that she too is worthy of receiving, of resting, of being carried. And the tragedy is not that she gave. The tragedy is that no one stopped to ask how she was holding up, how her heart was doing, how her soul was still standing in the weight of her own silence. There is a power in a woman's voice, not just in its tone or volume, but in the spirit it carries. Words, when spoken, do not simply vanish into the air. They settle, they seed, they shape the atmosphere around her. And when a woman allows herself to be a vessel for gossip, for bitterness, for complaint born from comparison or wounded pride, she does not just harm the one she speaks of, she wounds herself. For the mouth is a mirror, and what pours from it reflects what is blooming or broken within. Gossip is never about the subject, it is always about the speaker. And when a woman engages in tearing others down, especially in the presence of a man, she reveals more about her own insecurity than the flaws she tries to spotlight. A woman who indulges in the petty art of pointing fingers, whispering venom behind backs, always finds herself thirstier afterward, because gossip does not quench, it dries the soul. It leaves a sour taste on the tongue and a stain on the heart. It might feel like connection in the moment, a bonding ritual over shared criticism, but what it truly builds is a fragile trust, built on the illusion that cruelty brings closeness. A man who watches her speak ill of another woman hears the echo of how she might one day speak of him. He sees the pettiness, the insecurity, the subtle envy that hides behind sharp words dressed as honesty. And while he may nod, may even laugh, something in his spirit will recoil, for no soul is drawn to a storm that masquerades as light. Negativity, too, carries a heavy scent. When a woman constantly complains about others, about herself, about her life, she unknowingly trains the air around her to be heavy. Her energy begins to drag rather than lift. Her presence begins to drain rather than pour. She believes she is being real, being raw, being truthful, but truth without grace is just a wound left open. Constant criticism, whether toward herself or others, reveals a woman who has not yet learned how to speak to herself with kindness. And so her words reflect her inner war, sharp, restless, weary. She may speak poorly of other women, thinking it will make her shine, but in truth it only dims her crown. For no queen needs to diminish another to declare her reign. A woman's voice should be a balm, not a blade. It should carry wisdom, not whispers. When she speaks life, she becomes magnetic. When she uplifts others, she rises too. But when she allows her tongue to become a weapon, even subtly, even casually, she chips away at the sacredness of her femininity. There is nothing attractive about bitterness disguised as boldness or cruelty wrapped in cleverness. A man, especially one rooted in depth, listens beyond her words. He listens for intention, for compassion, for grace. And when he hears too much poison in her language, he begins to question the soil of her soul. There is a weariness that settles deep in the bones of a woman who spends her days trying to reshape the man she loves. She believes that if she whispers just the right words, if she pushes just the right buttons, if she prays just hard enough, he will become the version she has dreamed of, kinder, more attentive, more present. And so she takes on the task of sculptor, molding him quietly in the shadowed corners of their lives. She corrects his habits, edits his words, tugs gently on his heartstrings, all the while hoping that the man she loves will someday look back at her with the eyes of the man she wants him to be. But no matter how much love she pours into the attempt, the man remains himself, stubborn and unshaped by her will. To try and change a man is to deny the very essence of who he is. It is a silent declaration that he is not enough as he stands, that the love she offers is conditional, wrapped in the unspoken contract of transformation. This burden weighs heavy, not just on him, but on her soul, for she spends more energy chasing an idea than loving the man before her. The beauty of love lies in its acceptance, the kind that does not demand alteration, but celebrates presence. Yet the woman who tries to change him forgets this sacred truth. She forgets that the roots of a tree dig deep and strong precisely because they grow in the soil they were given, not the soil she wishes for. And so her efforts become like water spilled on stone, futile, frustrating, and often painful. In her quest to remake him, she risks losing herself. She bends her needs, her voice, her boundaries to fit the shape of a man who may never change. She justifies her sacrifice with promises of growth and hope, but beneath it all, a quiet bitterness begins to bloom. The man senses it too, the push and pull, the disappointment hidden behind smiles, the subtle resentment in her eyes. And as he resists the transformation, she grows weary, feeling trapped in a dance where the steps are never learned, the rhythm never shared. She forgets that love is a garden tended with patience, not a project built on expectations. She forgets that what is broken is not always meant to be fixed by another's hands. To try and change a man is to build a cage out of good intentions. It confines both souls, stifles growth, and dims the light that should shine freely. True love, the kind that endures and deepens, does not seek to sculpt, but to understand, not to control, but to embrace. And yet, the woman who tries to change him often carries the silent weight of loneliness in crowds, the ache of unmet dreams, the sorrow of a heart stretched thin by hope and reality tangled together. There is a vulnerability that is mistaken for weakness when a woman allows her lines to blur, when she welcomes everything and everyone into her life without a whisper of refusal. She believes that love means saying yes to all requests, all demands, all desires. She believes that to be kind, to be giving, to be needed, she must never close the door, never raise the shield. And so she stretches herself thin, bending like a reed in every direction, never anchored by the strength of no. She lets others walk across her heart like it is an open field, believing that love requires sacrifice without limit. But love without boundaries is not love. It is a slow erosion of the self. Boundaries are the sacred fences of the soul. They tell the world where she ends and others begin. They guard the garden of her heart, protect the sanctuary of her spirit. Without them, a woman becomes a passageway for exhaustion, resentment, and loss of dignity. She offers herself freely, but without reservation. She gives pieces away that were never hers to give, never meant to be scattered like seeds in the wind. And what she often finds is that those who take without respect do not return with gratitude. They do not honor the generosity, but exploit the absence of limits. The woman who has no boundaries wakes up one day feeling empty, invisible, unheard, not because she was not loved, but because she was overwhelmed by the weight of loving without guardrails. To have boundaries is to say to the world, "This is my sacred space." It is an act of courage, a refusal to sacrifice the self for the sake of another's comfort. And yet, the woman who struggles with boundaries often confuses love with obligation, kindness with duty, and generosity with self-neglect. She fears that to say no will invite rejection, will unravel the fragile threads holding her relationships together. But the truth is the opposite. Boundaries create space for authentic love to grow. Love that respects, love that nurtures,